Are you concerned Sean Diddy Combs could be sexually assaulted, violently assaulted? Because based on what was said in court, it feels like a thing.
Yeah, it clearly is a thing.
Welcome to the Two Angry Men podcast. Mark, Diddy is going to spend definitely 2+ years in a federal prison. I just want to lay this out right now. He is a target because they talked about this in court. They said somebody tried to shank him already, and that he is a big target. Are you concerned that Sean Diddy Combs could be sexually assaulted, violently assaulted? Is that a thing? Because based on what was said in court, it feels like a thing.
Yeah, it clearly is a thing. I mean, they're already, and he did not want to make a big deal of it. They already tried to shank him once at the MDC, and that was thwarted. And it happens in prison. I mean, you and I could tick off how many times we are aware of somebody getting seriously injured or killed in prison, and so they're going to have to keep him somewhere that they can keep an eye on him. It would have obviously been better if he had gotten less time and had been at a camp. But he's going to be in a facility where somebody's going to have to, from the BOP, and I think they're well equipped to do it if they can, to keep an eye on him because he is a target.
So what does he do? Do they put him in solitary? Is he with the general population? How is this going to work for 2 years?
Well, the first thing they do is they've got to designate him. That's what it's called. They're
Right.
going to take a look at what the judge said. They're going to see the order on the docket. They're going to take the months. They're going to take the offense characteristics. They're going to take some of the other findings that Judge Sabrahanian made, and they're going to designate him to a location. He's going to be in the MDC for a period of time before he's transferred. When he's transferred, then they're going to take all of that into account, and then he will be switched from the jail system to the prison system.
So what about this? And I know you can't disclose specific conversations because you represent Diddy, but can you give us a sense of the fear factor here on his part? Because they did attempt to shank him already. He knows he's a target. Now he knows that he faces upwards of 2 years, with credit and all. But is he freaked out?
Well, I haven't talked to him since the sentence. I know in talking to him for innumerable times that I would not say he's operating from a place of fear, although he was during the trial, as all defendants are, fearful. Nobody goes into a trial. Anybody who tells you they're not afraid when they're in trial is just lying through their teeth. But I think post-trial, he's acquitted himself well and was preparing himself for this. Obviously, I've got a lot to say about the sentence, but in terms of the fear factor, I think it's going to set in. I think over the next week, you're going to see him make some moves. And when I say make some moves, there's things you can do to try to figure out where and what you should do in terms of housing.
So the judge gave him 50 months and
5-0.
5-0.
5-0.
And where he served 13. And when you look at the 15% credit, it's going to be 2 years and change that he's going to actually have to serve. I got to ask you something about something that happened in court today. And we talked a lot about this on the live stream. And I couldn't believe my ears that Diddy booked a speech for Monday. When I heard that, I thought, yeah, when the prosecution said hubris, it's like, oh, yeah, the judge is going to let me out. It's no big deal. It was shocking to me that he would do something like that. It just seemed as tone deaf as just about anything I've heard in a long, long time.
It's interesting. There's been a lot of things, and obviously because I'm involved, I don't want to second guess. I don't want to lay blame. I might do that next week. But a lot of times you find that people in these situations and high profile people make decisions that aren't the best. And I think amongst them, I know that they tried to clean it up in courtroom afterwards. Who knows the real backstory here? All I know is that I think he is earnest, he being Sean, about wanting to better himself. I think the prosecution's kind of gambit, if you will, by asking for 135 months, basically just between 11 and 12 years, that has this effect of having the brain look to the midpoint. If somebody's at 14 and somebody's at 135, your brain automatically goes to the midpoint. And so there is that tendency that if you go so over the top, that you're going to get a sentence that exceeds, in my opinion, where he should have been.
Well,
It's also,
I thought he was going
and
to be. I thought he was going to go higher than he did.
yeah, I will tell you this. When I set kind of my internal over and under at 39 months going into this, and I thought there's a lot of reasons RDAP program, First Step program, given the Mann Act comparisons, why 39 months as being the high end of one of the guidelines made a lot of sense, low end or kind of mid range of one of the others. I thought when his honor came out and said that he went through the machinations of adopting the probation officers 70 to 80, whatever, that to me said, oh, this is 39's out the window. He's going over 39 months.
Well,
So I've respectfully lost all the bets with people who took the over 39.
well, and also what he said was, "I am going to consider all the violence in the testimony." And when I heard that, because the defense position was he was acquitted on the charges directly involving violence, so the judge shouldn't consider it. And the judge said from the jump, "I am going to consider it." And in the end, he said he was appalled by it, and you could just hear it, and literally said to Cassie, "I heard you." And so, even though he was acquitted, the judge said, "I can still consider that. It may not be beyond a reasonable doubt for jurors, but it's on the table for me."
And what he did was, and the argument was that it's what's called acquitted conduct, meaning there was conduct that he was acquitted of. And the judge said he wasn't going to basically go into that kind of whole line of cases, but he was going to consider it as a factor. And he did consider it obviously as a factor. And he said he was going to send a message, basically deterrence effect. I always think of my father whenever a judge says, I want to send a message. My father used to say, shows you how old I am. If you want to send a message, use Western Union. But judges do want to send messages in high profile cases. Anybody who says high profile cases, celebrity cases, you get a break. You don't get a break, because if this were somebody else who had rolled the dice, so to speak, who had bet their livelihood and all of his assets on the RICO, all of the life sentence on the sex trafficking, and won, instead of the government getting kind of an obstruction or all kinds of other tax tip and service charge. My opinion, and what normally happens is the judge would say, well, you took your best shot, government, and you took a swing, you lost, and I'm not going to let you indulge in being a sore loser. In this case, I think what he did was he said, I'm finding the guidelines 70 through 80, whatever. So now you could argue and go on appeal if he sentenced within the guidelines that he miscalculated them. But what he did was, and I was telling one of my partners as he did that, I said, you watch, he can be intellectually diabolical. The way to insulate this sentence and this appeal is to come substantially under the guidelines that he's accepted of probation, but hammer him nonetheless. And that's exactly what he did.
Uh,
You come in at 50 to 60, it insulates the appeal.
Yep. And that leads me to what I thought he was going to do as a Hail Mary. So indulge me for a minute. That
Please.
when Diddy said he wanted to speak, which I knew he would do. Um,
Well, you and I talked about it yesterday.
I
I
know.
said, we talked about it off
I
air
I
yesterday.
I
I said to
agreed.
you, he had to speak.
So here's what I thought he was going to say, because at that point he knew he wasn't going to walk out of jail. He knew he was going to get time and significant time. So here's what I thought he was going to say. Your Honor, and he does his whole apology and remorse and all of that, and he does it all. And then at the end he says this. Your Honor, respectfully, I would like to say that I now understand what President Trump was saying when he said that the Justice Department was weaponized against him, because I feel similarly. I feel like that's what happened to me, not with the Mann Act, but with all those other charges. And they went into my bedroom the way they tried to go into President Trump's bedroom, and it was wrong. And I thought that he would throw that Hail Mary to get a pardon. And Donald Trump, to me, loves flattery more than anything. And if he embraced him in that courtroom, I thought that was his best shot. And it didn't happen. Talk to me about that.
You know, people often, I think you are miscast in some quarters, not all quarters, but I don't think people understand what a brilliant tactician strategist you are. Because if he had done that, I might have kind of massaged the message. I think there are, and you've heard me talk about this, I think there's incredible similarities between Diddy's situation and the president's situation. I think not the least of which is the lead prosecutor, conspicuous by her absence today, Maureen Comey, was the one who prosecuted both Diddy and Epstein, and whose father was basically indicted at the kind of dispatch of the president. And there are similarities. They are both in New York. They both had, in my opinion, prosecutors who weaponized the criminal justice system against them. And by the way, as soon as Sean heard the fact that the judge was adopting the sentencing guidelines that we just talked about, as soon as that judge said, I'm going to overrule the objections, overrule the idea of that he's going to adopt any of the defense constitutional or due process objections, if I'm Sean Combs and I'm sitting in that courtroom, I would have just said, you know what? You're right. This guy, his honor is going to hammer me. I'm not walking out of here. I don't know whose harebrained scheme it was to book a speaking engagement or whatever for next week. I don't care what the speaking engagement was, unless it was something that was going to be remote or virtual. That isn't even something you should have been talking about. And I should have been appealing to the other judge of one who could do something for me is DJT.
So why didn't it happen? Because look, we had a big argument about this on the live stream today. That there were people who were saying, "Oh, he'd lose his base," and I'm kind of like, I don't. Number one, I don't know he'd lose his entire base. And you know what? If you lose your base, you gain another base, and you're free. And that seems to be what matters. So, was this discussed? I mean, was it rejected? I mean, did
I
somebody
can't
think of it?
I I can't get into any of that as work product. What I will tell you is, and I'm critiquing the team myself. I thought that the die was cast when his honor came out and overruled the objections. So at that point, you have to. I always say my favorite word in the criminal law is fluidity. You cannot it's the Mike Tyson, who was a former client of mine. And Mike famously said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the nose. And when you get punched in the nose, you have to remain fluid. You've got to do something. And I'm not second guessing anybody, but this was not This was not the finest hour.
Not hard to read between the lines. Um, was there a problem because there were too many lawyers in this case? Because I'm just thinking when there's one, um, you use somebody who has great judgment, and there were plenty of people with good judgment, but this felt like a committee. And we talked about this at the beginning, and you kind of dismissed it and said, yeah, well, this happens a lot. But I'm thinking you have one person saying, do it this way, do it this way. It's easier, it's clearer, and you take bolder moves than when it gets kind of watered down. And that's kind of what it felt like today for me.
Look, I love everybody on the team, but I was insistent to the extent I was listened to, which I think was quite a bit, that Mark and Tenny run the show and Alexandra handle the appellate. Mark and Tenny should have run the sentencing, in my opinion, and I'll just leave it at that.
So the appeal seems off the. Are they even going to bother appealing this?
Oh, I think it's way too early to make that determination. I mean, you have to let it sit in. I will tell you, and by the way, 50 months, 50, leaves you open to a number of possibilities if you're Sean Combs. And he will be consulting with consultants, he'll be consulting with professionals who will give him the advice on that, who understand exactly the permutations. But for an appeal, I'm going to go back to the point I made and try to make it less esoteric. By giving him 50 months, by the judge sentencing him to 50 months, the appeal, I think, if I'm handicapping it, if somebody comes to me and says, Mark, what do you think about an appeal? It's not Sean Combs, it's somebody else. The judge found sentencing guidelines that were over 70, and the judge went under by 20. And then I'm asked, I went to trial, I lost on a couple of counts, and the judge went under what probation suggested the guidelines are. I would tell you that an appeal is it's always a heavy lift. It just becomes a Herculean lift because of the way the judge did it. And by the way, I've said this a couple of times. This is not a judge who this job was a upgrade. He took a massive pay cut. He was an accomplished litigator. He has a pedigree that most law students would envy. And he's a very, very brilliant man. And if you don't think he thought this through and understands, no judge wants to get reversed. And this is about as insulated a sentence as you can get from an appeal. Having said that, on the Mann Act itself, he left some wiggle room open for the constitutionality of the Mann Act as applied. That's a separate grounds for appeal than the sentence itself. As far as the sentence itself, I just think that's a lift. That's a bridge too far.
So a lot of defendants in his position would get a prison consultant. And I would think that you've gotten one for him already, that he's talked to them. And I would think he's talked to them. I want to go back to the safety issue that, Diddy, and the judge seemed to buy it. Diddy sexually brutalized these women. You may not say he did, and Diddy may not say he did, but the judge clearly believed it. So that puts an even bigger target on his back, to be sexually assaulted in prison, to be violently assaulted. So was this addressed by a prison consultant yet? Does he have one? Have they talked?
Look, I talk to prison consultants, I want to say at least once a day for high profile and no profile clients. I think prison consultants are one of the essentials. Don't leave home without them, so to speak. Don't go to prison without one. And I say this because they tell you, and normally, I mean, you take somebody like Craig Rothfeld, who's one of the top two or three, if not the top. They understand it because they've lived it and they get it, and they know certain things that you just can't know having been on the outside. It would not surprise me if I, at a certain point, put another client of mine in touch with him just to give him some guidance as well. or another two clients, because there are things you have to do. You have to look forward. You can't look backwards. But Harvey, I hate to say it, but the reality is the only thing that's more at risk when you go to prison is a child murderer or child sexual predator.
That's right. And so I don't feel I'm raising this crazy hypothetical when I
No,
say,
it's not. It's not clickbait at all. You're having a discussion that's a very hard discussion that criminal defense lawyers have to have weekly, if not more often.
so you talk to these prison consultants all the time. What would they say to a high profile person like this about avoiding sexual and other violent assaults?
There's all kinds of things that, I mean, the first and foremost is, where do you get designated? That I can't emphasize enough, that before you do anything in terms of preparing yourself, you have got to take your best shot as designation. Now, you have some control over that. And when I say you, I'm talking about kind of the royal we, meaning the court, your lawyers can inform, can bring stuff to the attention of those who make the designation. You can send them material. You can try to point out things. But ultimately, at the end of the day, that's a decision that is made internally. They have their own protocol. They've got their own checklist, so to speak, and they're going to designate you at a spot. Now, you do have remedies if you get designated to some place you don't necessarily think you belong. I've had clients who have challenged that successfully, where they've been designated. They think it was because of a misnomer or a misclassification, and they've successfully done it. But sometimes be careful what you wish for. You get a little kind of what I call in LA parlance freeway therapy, where okay, you want to go someplace that's not as onerous. We're going to send you someplace where you've got no relative anywhere near you because you challenged us. I don't want to say it's punitive, but it's punitive. And so that is the next kind of effort that's going to be made, is to determine and to handle where the designation is. And I'll bet you TMZ breaks that news as to where the designation is, probably within minutes of when they make the designation.
So let's say he is sent to a minimum security prison. Is he out of the woods when it comes to that kind of assault?
If you're going, you and I talked about Ghislaine Maxwell, who went from the one place in Florida, which was a higher level, not a camp. And she was transferred after she did the interview with the couple day interview. She was transferred to a what they call a camp in Texas, which I'm familiar with. I've had other clients in. So a camp is generally one of the better places to be. And the reason for that is because a camp is basically, you get certain privileges. And if you step off of the line, so to speak, if you violate, if you do anything that is not according to Hoyle, they will immediately send you someplace a lot more onerous. So that's why I say, in a long-winded answer to your question, yes, you've got to get designated somebody. I know he wants to be New York adjacent. If I'm Sean right now, I'm going to be angling for someplace like Lompoc satellite camp or something along those lines.
But that still doesn't answer. Is he out of the woods when it comes to being sexually or in any way assaulted by being
I,
in a minimum security prison?
when you say out of the woods, it greatly, look, it's a prison. Anywhere you go is a prison. You always have to watch your back, literally. And if that's the case, you're never really out of the woods until you're released, or you go to a halfway house, or you get into one of the programs. But if you are in a camp or in a low level designation, your odds go down dramatically. I mean, you and I, there's no, I just saw a buddy of mine didn't wake up, who's substantially younger than you and me over last weekend. So there's no guarantees you're going to wake up in the morning. So there's never any guarantee. But if he gets designated at what they call a satellite camp, or one of the low security institutions, it's a lot safer for him.
So he is used to calling the shots. And, you know, I don't know how much you can talk about this because, I mean, he's your client. But I know that people who call the shots when suddenly others are calling them for you and you are suddenly a number rather than a king, that it's hard. Do you have any
Yeah.
concerns that he's going to have a really rough time following the straight and narrow while he's in prison?
Well, I think he has, I've seen it personally. I think he has changed dramatically while in the jail, which is not a prison. I'll make that distinction. Pre-conviction, post-conviction, pre-conviction jail, post-conviction prison. So he has changed dramatically. However, there's always that tendency. It's in the personality. I mean, you're 55 years old like Sean, you're 60 some odd like me, 70 some odd like you. It's very hard to change old habits. And the judge kind of said that in as much today in a different context, but it holds true everywhere. You're going to have to fight against that urge. You're going to have to fight against it. It's Sean said something that I thought in his statement was that it was humbling, and clearly it is humbling. And I will tell you, Harvey, and you've seen it with a lot of the people that you've followed over the years, there's various avenues that you can take. There's various decisions you make when you're in custody. And I always tout the Menendez brothers as making good decisions. There are others that I've had who've made incredibly bad decisions. I'm always hopeful that somebody makes the good ones.
Yeah. Um, so if you had to put this on a scale, 10 being he's in huge trouble in prison, and 1, he's going to be fine. Just in terms of the next 2 years for him, in terms of the dangers of being there, the difficulty of being there, what number do you put it at?
A four.
Really?
A four. Yeah,
Really?
I think, and you might have me reassess once he gets designated, but right now I don't have. I mean, I was fearful when the judge took the probation guidelines recommendations. I mean, I've been on a roller coaster all day on this. I was on a roller coaster yesterday on this, and it's been very hard to handicap this. And and I know, and when I say handicap, it's because I'm so incredibly close to it. And you constantly, when you have one of these cases or you're affiliated in some way, shape, or form, you're trying to always give the best advice you can. And in this case, I can second guess, and I always second guess, not just this case, any case. But I'm hopeful that he gets designated to a place where he can continue to do the work on himself, which he needs to do. He's the first guy to admit he needs to do the work on himself. Even post conviction, he hasn't made all the best decisions, and he would be the first to admit that. He's made some really good decisions, but he's going to have to continue to work on that daily. It's not you don't just flip a switch and change. It's hard work, and he's doing the hard work, and I hope he continues.
Okay, and finally, um, and I don't want to put you in a difficult position. If you don't want to answer it, it's fine. But the defense did an amazing job during the trial. I mean, they just did. And they won. I don't think they did a good job in the sentencing hearing. And, I thought the video they played was too slick. They put music on it. It didn't feel authentic to me. The idea of allowing him to book a speech on Monday was ridiculous. They avoided playing the trump card even obtusely. There were just a number of things. And I'm wondering what was the difference because it was basically the same crew. Why did it feel so different to me with the trial and then the sentencing?
There's no way I can answer that question except to say, Harvey, you're a very astute observer of the human condition. I'll
Okay,
leave it at that.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I saw something radically different today.
I'll leave it at that. I'm good to see you. I'm coming back.
Have a safe flight.
Thank you. Bye bye.
See ya.